Morning everyone, or good day from down under I should say, to keep it Aussie. One of the amazing things about the a7iii is the dynamic range recovery that you've got in these cameras. The dynamic range really is insane, and I'm finding out the longer I go with these Sony cameras, it's just amazing how much you can manipulate the image, really bringing things up like shadows and midtones, also bringing down highlights not as much. The definite real improvement is in the midtones and the shadows particularly, but really it just astounds me sometimes how far you can now push these files. And it is one of the areas where, to be honest, buying the latest cameras has helped if you are trying to improve your photography. Often you can say that the art itself is the main focus, but dynamic range is definitely one of the areas where you can improve your photography if you don't expose correctly in the first place. And I want to sort of explain this in a minute to you, or if you wanted to underexpose and bring back some detail later on in the shadow. So I wanted to show you a shot I did of Kiara. I did do a video on this recently as well, but I thought I'd expand it again because this was another shot that I took last week that I wanted to discuss with you. So let's look at the shot. So the shot is this one. It's actually of Kiara. It was shot with the a7iii. And it was shot at 1/640th of a second at 1.8 at ISO 100, and it was with the 85mm Batis. Now the thing that I was actually trying to do here was I was actually trying to overpower that light that was coming in from the, or not overpower, but I wanted to balance the ambient with a flash exposure. So this was just a test that I was doing initially to get the exposure correct. And what I did first here was I just balanced the ambient, and then I was going to add in fill, which was a Profoto B1 just off to camera right to fill in Kiara to balance out the whole lighting, which you can see if you go into the next shot here. Basically, if you look at it, let me just drop the highlights a fraction. You can see here that that's basically what I've ended up getting with these shots later on. But I just wanted to show you what you can do basically with these files, because you can get a usable file out of something like this, for instance, which a while ago you wouldn't have been able to get anything out of. And this is the beauty of the dynamic ranges of these latest Sony sensors. So let's just have a little bit of a play. Now remember, there's always going to be an issue if you do bring up your shadows and stuff quite drastically. There is going to be noise, but that never worries me. I never worry about noise, to be honest. My clients have never complained about the noise, and also, like I said, I can reduce that in Photoshop if I wanted to. But let's just have a play around with this just to see what we can get out of this file. So basically all I'm going to do is lift up the exposure overall. Now I don't want to go too far because I still want to keep a bit of detail out in this window through here, and then I'm going to drop the highlights back down so I've still got detail through this area here. I'm then going to open up the shadows. Now this is where you can see that where I can get the amount of information out of this file where it can be still quite usable. So I'm going to drag it up a reasonable way. I'm not going to go too far. Again, if you're starting to see highlight, I can drag the highlight down just a little bit. And then you can play around with shadows too to get a bit of contrast if you like, the blacks. And I'm going to leave it around about here. Now, if I then wanted to, I could add a little bit of clarity to get a little bit of sharpness back on this image. And if I came down here, I could also use the curves. Now you can grab the curves to grab highlights, lights, darks, but I'm just going to target the area that I want to target. And I'm just going to click on this little icon here, adjust contour. Click on that, and then I'm just going to grab the highlights and then just drag that up. And basically you can see that it's dragged the curve up. Now that's without going into Photoshop. Now then I would take it into Photoshop to give it a kick as well. But the point here that I'm trying to make to you is that you can get really quite a usable shot from exposing. Now you're almost getting HDR in these images. Now if I take it to the one I've edited in Photoshop, this is where I've taken this to in Photoshop. You know, and I'm really quite happy with how the image looks. And when you think about that, I've grabbed that exposure, balancing ambient, and I've just had her facing a window on the other side, so it's given her that little lift in the face. I've just added a little bit more exposure in Photoshop as compared to, say, here where it was just a little bit flat. Once I've taken this into Photoshop, I've got a completely usable file with incredible dynamic range right off the bat. I mean, honestly, how good now are these latest sensors that you can do this type of thing? Years ago, I never would have had a usable file out of that. So it's just showing you where you can go by dragging your images. Let me just take this back down again so you can see how the original image looked, just so you can compare the two. I've just got to reset the tone curve. Let me just set that back. Okay. So that was the original image that I actually came out with, and there's the retouched image that I've actually got without using any flash or anything internal to balance ambient and internal exposure. It's incredible. So I just wanted to share that with you. Let me know in the comments box down below what you think about that. You know, how good is the Sony dynamic range particularly? I'd love to know your thoughts on it as well. And I'll see you all again soon for another video. Bye for now.